I started making documentaries by fluke. Like many things that happen in life, it wasn't planned, it was a bit of an accident. I had spent 10 years at EastEnders. I managed somehow to get what they then called a golden handcuffs deal. It would now probably be a tin handcuffs deal at ITV. In the process of that contract, I found I had a lot more time on my hands. And I think I was the fourth person they phoned up and asked. I know that because they did ring up the great late A.A. Gill, I believe, and he flatly turned it down. When they rang me up, they said, "You're the first person we've called for this. We think you'd be brilliant." And anyway, it was a documentary about America's relationship with firearms. My dad was in the police, in the army. I have relatives in the forces. They knew about that. They thought I'd be a good person to host or present a documentary about guns. In the process of making that documentary, I was told I was about to meet a guy who was in the Bloods. In those days, Bloods and Crips were only seen on MTV. There wasn't the internet. Mobile phones, in fact, were in their infancy. That's how long ago it was, about 16 years ago. I met Bloodhound. I was told that he'd been shot 27 times. I said that was bullshit. No one survives being shot 27 times. When I met him, I asked him straight away. He lifted his shirt up and he had a body like a tea bag. He'd been cranked open twice. He'd taken 6 9mm in the chest while he was on the ground. A Crip had come up and put the gun under his chin, pulled the trigger. The bullet had gone up, taken the end of his tongue off, so he had a snake tongue. It had exited just the left of his nostril, re-entered over the arch of his eye, and slipped between the skin and his skull and lodged at the top of his head. He wore a red bandana which he took off, and he's got Lucky tattooed in the horseshoe there. But what I realised, the most important thing that I realised about Bloodhound was that despite the fact that he had a rusty AK-47 and he had a Smith & Wesson in case the AK jammed tucked down the back of his pants, and he said very clearly that if a car slowed down and started firing, he would fire back. He was a very, very bright, very nice man, and the antithesis of what I was seeing on MTV in terms of he didn't have lots of bling, he didn't have a Ferrari, he didn't have a model with fake breasts. He had a very large wife with 2 kids on either hip and a blocked toilet and not very much cash. And he was doing what he was doing, basically to survive. And the most important thing I thought about him was this, was that he was scared. And he was prepared to admit that. Even though he'd been shot that many times, he was still scared about losing his life. And I thought that was an interesting point, that you weren't seeing on MTV, that you weren't being shown in the movies. So I got on the phone to some people that I knew. I rang them up and I said, I've got an idea for a documentary called Ross Kemp on Gangs. And we went on to make 27 of them. We look at what's going on in the world, we monitor the internet. We've made about 78 documentaries around the world, predominantly in hostile environments. We've got access to places that a lot of people can't get access. And one of the reasons is the actual internet now. People see what we've made and they realise that we don't go in there with an agenda. We give people a platform, so long as they're not using us for their own ends entirely, we'll let them talk. And so you'll be surprised how many people hoist themselves with their own petard as well. They go out there with an agenda, hoping to sway people by giving their point of view, and they end up making themselves look rather foolish. And if that's what they're going to do, then that's what they're going to do. But you'll be surprised how many people, and we can't pay people for interviews, you'll be surprised how many people, particularly torturers, murderers, will talk very openly and very frankly about what they've done on camera if you get to know them. And what we do, and what I do with the team, is that we spend a lot of time with these people. We don't just roll up the day before. We will get to know them over weeks. We'll get to know their families if they have families. And also people know that if they've asked for their identity to remain hidden, we've always done that, we've always been true to that. So in a way, the internet has helped us. And also the fixers on the ground, they're the most important people. I might walk in at the end and take the glory, but the most important person for me has always been the fixer on the ground. And when we finish filming, we pack our kit away and we get on our plane and we fly off, they're still there. And I've always maintained one thing: there's no film that's ever been made that's worth a person's life. So we always make sure that we try to leave the place sort of in the way that we found it. If you are risking your life to make a film, you have to rely on each other. And I would say, no matter how much you need to be a team when you're working as an actor, for instance, or playing football, at the end of the day, hopefully, no one's risking their lives. And when people do die on the ground, which has happened, not my team, but the people we've been filming with, particularly in Afghanistan, it is a sobering moment. And no matter how many times it happens, it will always shock. And what I do is we do a thing called trauma risk management. So we sit down as a team and we will discuss what's happened. Now, it could be someone has been killed, sadly, or it could be an interview with a rape victim. It could be the fact that we get into a lot of road traffic accidents, or road traffic collisions as they're called, because they're not accidents apparently in health and safety. And we will talk about it individually from our POV, our point of view. And that's a very good way of stopping PTSD and other sorts of mental trauma from incidents, because you're explaining how you saw it and what happened. That person's explaining how they saw it. And that stops a lot of people feeling guilty. Also, you're more happier to admit that if you have made a mistake, get it out of the way and don't allow it to fester inside the team. Because the next day, you're all going to have to be sharp, you're going to have to be up early, and you're going to have to be on your game. And you can't be holding any grudges. And thankfully, over the years, we've got to know each other so well that we can speak very freely with each other and transfer that information. And also, the most important thing is we have a sense of humour. The way it works really on the ground, particularly if we know we're going into somewhere dangerous, is a democratic autonomy. We'll discuss it. Everyone has a right, if they don't feel good about what might happen, and that happens on a regular basis, they've got a right not to go. But most of the time, I do own the company. Maybe I have 2 votes. But obviously I will listen to my team. We've all got a lot of experience of hostile environments. And we often agree that if we think something is too dodgy, too iffy, if we're putting ourselves out there too far, we won't do it. Because as I say, there's no film that's ever been made that's worth someone's life. We were recently in Madagascar meeting a bunch of guys called the Dahalo. Now these guys are cattle rustlers. Sounds like something out of the Magnificent Seven. But they kill, they rape, they go into villages, they'll kill all the men, take the women, steal the children as well, and take all the cattle. And it's a big business. It's a million euro business because of the demand for beef from the Far East. We were told on numerous occasions that they wouldn't meet us. They don't have mobile phones. This is an area in the world where there is no electricity either. There's no advertising. It takes 3 days to get there. You could have flown to Australia and back quicker than it took us to get to this part of Madagascar. And there is a reason for that. It's very, very isolated, and there's no one going to help. There's no phone signal anyway, and there's no one to call, and there's no one to. If you ring 999, no one's going to come and get you. So you have to be very careful. And you have to be very guarded. And we felt definitely, because the reputation these guys had, that we would not meet them. And eventually, after about a week and a half's negotiation, we actually made contact with someone who knew one, and from that one we met 2, we met 3, and eventually we actually went up and met them in this canyon. But you always turn the vehicles around to make sure you can make a quick exit. You let the powers that be back in the UK know that you have to ring in by a certain time if you can get signal, which we found a place where we could get signal, and you take all the precautions that you would do to make sure you come out alive. But there's always a risk. I talk about a Mr. Khan when I do speeches as being probably one of the most evil men I've ever met. We had no idea. We knew that he had been a honey trap merchant, so he'd go into a village in the poor areas of West Bengal and he'd buy a girl that he thought was attractive a Coke, which means a heck of a lot to a very poor person. Then he might buy sweets for her, he might buy jewellery, he might even give money to the family in terms of trying to get the girl to be able to go out with him on her own. Eventually he'd get her to get on a train, and once she got on that train she'd be drugged. Once she was on that train and drugged, she'd be sent to a larger city, Mumbai, Kolkata, and there she'd be chained to a bed, and she'd probably be chained to that bed for at least 6 months, and she would be raped. No means of ever leaving that brothel, no means of ever getting home. We knew that he did that, but I wasn't really prepared for. I knew that we'd told that he'd kill girls. If things came on top for him with the local police, that he had murdered girls or ordered their murder. And the guy had started off being a honey trap merchant, but he now had, we reckon, about 700 people working for him doing the same thing. On camera, he told me that he had no proper idea, but he'd killed between 300 to 400 girls, which makes him a mass murderer. And he didn't actually know the exact amount, but what really got to me, will stay with me for the rest of my life, was the fact that he started crying and he started feeling sorry for himself. And that for me will always be one of the hardest interviews that I ever did. What I've found, if you look around the world at people, is that most people want the same thing. Like, they want to live peacefully, they want a better life for the children than they had, they want to have enough food, they want to maybe have a drink, and they want peace. And the majority of the people that I've met around the world actually want that. It's just that we specialise in meeting the few that don't. And I witnessed incredible inhumanity, but also unbelievable generosity. And you'd be surprised with all the things that, I have. Television, computer, car, nice house. I know people who are a damn sight happier than me on Monday mornings when they get up than when I get up, and they have nothing in comparison to what I have. And I think it's a great thing about my job, is that it's a constant reminder that you don't need all those things necessarily to be happy. And maybe we rush a little bit too fast, we walk a bit too quickly, and we should slow down and occasionally smell the flowers.